Introduction. From Pain to Power. Ultimately, each and every one of us is in pursuit of an enhanced emotional state, and what makes us happy varies greatly from person to person. With that said, we all share an innate fear of being hurt by those around us, whether it's by a friend or a family member. Often, the most painful of these experiences originate from our most intimate relationships. The chances are that, at some point, you will have fallen foul of a manipulator in your day-to-day life. They probably hurt you, and it's likely that you are aware of a few manipulative people with whom you have met or seen on a regular basis, whether you are their victim or not. What's more, numerous texts claim to demonstrate how you can use coercive techniques to better manipulate others. Therefore, it stands to be reason that many of those around you may be bending you to their will in one way or another, whether you are aware of it or not. The unavoidable, inevitable truth is that you are being manipulated, whether you are aware of it or not. Whether the perpetrator is aware of it or not, whether the individual is an individual or a vast multinational entity, this is an undeniable fact. But there are precautions you can take, measures that you can put into place, and skills that you can learn that will, to some extent, protect you from manipulators. They are typically competitive people, and by educating yourself on the matter, you gain a competitive edge. With enough understanding of their methods, you can disarm a manipulator. Whilst some people are blatant and harmful in their manipulations, and some are even proud to call themselves influencers, for many of us, morals and personal ethics get in the way of using such techniques of social manipulation for personal gain. The purpose of this book, therefore, is to inform you of the methods that they use, not so that you can learn to manipulate others, but so that you can identify those who use dark psychological techniques against you. Consider the following a guide to psychological defense. The solution. How can we deal with manipulative individuals? The answer is multifaceted. Firstly, we familiarize ourselves with the types of manipulation and manipulative individuals that are most commonly encountered. For example, people with narcissistic personality types have been found to engage in social manipulation more than others. Secondly, we make ourselves aware of the telltale signs of manipulation and manipulators. By identifying the behaviors and mannerisms that are most commonly associated with social string pulling, we can pick a manipulator out of a crowd, giving us the upper hand and the competitive edge so that we may deal with the perpetrator as we see fit. Thirdly, we discuss methods that may be used to deal with such social encounters in a practical, hands-on manner with an arsenal of pre-prepared sentences and statements at your disposal, and the tips contained in this book to utilize. You will find yourself feeling far better equipped to deal with the next manipulator that crosses your path. The benefits. There are many benefits to becoming more aware of how people might manipulate you, some obvious and some less so. There are always a few nasty surprises in life, but you will have greater potential than others to avoid encounters with those that intend to exploit you. By being aware of how they operate, we can minimize our emotional distress. Peace of mind and a lessened state of anxiety can be achieved once you become confident in your ability to identify those harmful individuals around you. This understanding allows you to distance yourself from negative individuals, further minimizing the likelihood of being hurt. All humans communicate non-verbally in various ways. By learning to analyze these signals, you can develop skills that may prove particularly helpful in your professional life as well as your social one. We can learn to monitor, anticipate, and prepare for certain social situations. You may also notice improvements in other non-harmful relationships. The reason for this is that by teaching ourselves to study people, to analyze them to an extent, we become more aware of their needs and can adjust our behavior accordingly. Furthermore, you may even find yourself more attuned to your own emotions after analyzing yourself. Consider this point as a bonus. By opening up to an individual, we render ourselves vulnerable. Not to say that anyone should avoid close relationships. However, this becomes especially apparent when we examine intimate and romantic relationships. By becoming more aware of our closest relationships, we see how one may be victimized in these most painful of social situations. Where's the proof? All around you. Manipulative psychological methods have been employed by entities on every level of society, from your next-door neighbor to your government. Corporations want you to buy their products. Cults and religions want you to pledge your allegiance. Terrorists want you to fear them. And your partner wants you to wash the dishes. All of these groups and individuals may be willing to use invasive psychological techniques to further their own agenda. Clearly, we don't need to look far for evidence that we are all made to dance like puppets from time to time. What can we hope to learn? After exploring some of the concepts in this book, you will find yourself gaining some, if not all, of the following skills. Improved ability to analyze other people's behavior and to interpret their emotions. Greater confidence in your social interactions, knowing that you are in control. The ability to clearly distinguish between truth and lies. A greater understanding of your own vulnerabilities and how to defend yourself despite them. Greater ease in working with a variety of individuals. Greater resistance to fallibility in your interactions. Greater awareness of methods that may be used by individuals as well as by faceless, emotionless entities. A greater sense of individuality as you find yourself breaking away from the pack, thinking and acting on your own terms for a more gratifying existence. What's the rush? Life is finite. The question is, how long do you want to wait? The sooner you come to understand the sinister nature of certain forces, the sooner you can break free from their manipulative, constraining hold and start living your own life. It is important to remember that one cannot simply avoid pain forever. Social manipulation is a fact of life, but the information contained within this book, when interpreted and followed responsibly, can serve to minimize those moments of emotional agony. Chapter 1. Understanding Manipulation. The basic tool for the manipulation of reality is the manipulation of words. If you can control the meaning of words, you can control the people who must use the words. Philip K. Dick. This chapter will touch on some popular theories of manipulative psychology and their origins, as well as which vulnerabilities are most commonly exploited by manipulators and the motivation of such manipulators. Beware of the malevolent dark triad. The dark triad is a psychological theory that comprises a trilogy of personality traits. These are narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. The dark triad, a term originally coined in the 1990s, has since received much support from numerous statistical studies of personality types. Of these three personality traits, narcissism and Machiavellianism are most closely associated with manipulative social interactions, and the degree to which a person is Machiavellian can be measured on the quote-unquote Mach scale. Numerous scales of narcissism exist. Typically, individuals who score high on the Mach scale are, compared to most, lacking in concern for morality, unemotional in their interactions, and far more inclined to engage in social manipulation. As there is an overlap between the three qualities of the dark triad, it pays to be aware that an individual who is particularly involved in one may also score highly in another. For example, a person who appears to be more narcissistic, like vain, self-centered, and egotistical, may also be especially psychopathic, lacking in empathy, or Machiavellian, prone to coercion and manipulation. The narcissist. Narcissism, whilst only one of a few personality traits associated with manipulative behavior, is a term understood by most of us and is characterized by the following qualities: vanity, egotism, a sense of entitlement, a need for admiration, self-centeredness. Interestingly, popular psychoanalysis theories suggest that narcissism stems from an issue in which, as a baby, the individual was unable to distinguish themselves from other objects in the world around them. This difficulty gave birth to a feeling of insignificance, a need to tower over others, make their mark, and be the very greatest member of their flock. The most extreme narcissists can be said to have narcissistic personality disorder, typically when their self-centered grandiosity grows to such an extent that it interferes with their daily lives and functions. It has been estimated that around 1% of the population have narcissistic personality disorder, but as is the case with all personality traits, they exist on a scale, and most of us have narcissistic tendencies to some degree. The victim's vulnerabilities. Some people are naturally more resistant to manipulative techniques, whilst others appear to attract manipulators. By becoming aware of the qualities that manipulators are looking for, we can minimize the likelihood that we are targeted. There are certain qualities that may render you more vulnerable to manipulation. These include: you have low self-esteem, your defenses are low, and your lack of self-regard makes this especially obvious to manipulators. You are honest. Honesty is a great quality to have, but beware with whom you share your truths. Manipulators can easily exploit someone they are certain will always tell the truth. You are very trusting. Trust should be earned. This may seem obvious, but it's surprising just how many of us are willing to put our trust in a complete stranger. You are highly empathetic. You want to help others and are willing to put yourself in a vulnerable position to do so. You struggle to maintain social boundaries. Manipulators are drawn to easy targets, and those with lower defense and ambiguous social boundaries are definitely the easiest. In addition to the above points, people who crave attention, are naive, lonely, or immature may also find themselves to be targeted by manipulators. It's vital that we do what we can to maximize our resilience in these respects. By allowing yourself to be an easy target and broadcasting your vulnerability, you are practically inviting manipulators to exploit you. Manipulators' motivations. A manipulator may have one or several motivations. Some example of these may include a strong desire to be in control. They need to feel that they are pulling the strings and not someone else. The need to advance their own personal agenda, and they may be willing to do this at any cost. This may be potentially criminal or for financial or social gain. The need for a sense of superiority. The feeling of power that a manipulator gets by manipulating brings him or her pleasure. This may even be a way of increasing their own self-esteem. It's quite possible that by putting others down, they lift themselves up. Be cautious of those individuals who appear willing to backstab and trample to get a rung or two up the social ladder. A cure for boredom. This is certainly one of the darkest possible motivations for manipulation. The manipulator derives pleasure from making you do their bidding. Unconscious manipulations. More innocently, a manipulator may not be even aware of his or her actions. It may be the case that the manipulator does not identify with the emotions of others. An example of a non-deliberate manipulation would be if your partner suffered from commitment phobia and a fear of becoming too attached to you, and this, therefore, enables them to rationalize their covert behaviors. 3 toxic subtypes of narcissism. Here are the 3 archetypical manipulative narcissistic characters that you may even get the impression you have already met. 1. The charismatic leader. He swaggers around the office, flexing his biceps and engaging in banter whilst oozing false charm all over anyone who will listen. He is always the loudest voice in the room and certainly considers himself the most interesting. He's a textbook narcissist, pinning for the attention and approval of everyone around him. 2. The oppressive partner. Your partner is overly protective and is prone to jealousy. They seem willing to go out of their way to keep you close all the time and may even be pleased when certain things don't work out for you. They hold you close, but it's out of fear as much as love. 3. The quiet one. They brood in the corner at the office party, perhaps anxious but absolutely judgmental. They look down their nose at everyone around them with an air of superiority. They might not say it aloud, but they think they are better than you, and you can tell. Think about whether these people seem familiar to you. It may pay to be cautious of anyone who fits these descriptions. Takeaway points. 1. Manipulators come in many forms, influencing others in many different ways. 2. Most manipulators will target those they perceive to be psychologically vulnerable. 3. Their motivations are varied and not always as malicious as it may seem. 4. The field of psychology offers a wealth of academic literature on manipulation. Chapter 2. How to identify a manipulator. Your greatest enemy will hide in the last place you would ever look. Caesar. Common traits. There are a number of traits that the majority of manipulators share. By identifying these patterns and similarities, we can better prepare ourselves for real-life encounters with harmful social manipulators. 1. They know how to detect your weaknesses. They can identify your vulnerabilities, which is why it is essential that you can identify them as well. 2. They will use these weaknesses against you. Your vulnerabilities are like a backdoor to your mind, and most of the vicious manipulators you will encounter have absolutely no hesitation about letting themselves in. 3. The manipulator will, once inside, help themselves to whatever serves their self-centered needs. This need may come in any form and may be different for every manipulator. 4. And once they have benefited, the manipulator is likely to repeat offend. Once you have been taken advantage of, the perpetrator will likely continue to do so until you put a stop to the violations. It helps to have an understanding of the traits that are commonly associated with narcissistic personality disorder, which, as mentioned above, correlates significantly with manipulative and Machiavellian personality types. A narcissist typically has a grandiose sense of self-importance. This could be also referred to as a sense of superiority. Beware of those individuals who think that they are special, because it often follows that they possess a sense of entitlement to whatever they please and are willing to manipulate others to get it. They often have a distorted view of reality. The reason for this is that they cultivate fantasies to support their self-centered delusions because reality does not support them. Delusions of grandeur and unlimited power allow them to feel in control. The narcissist often fears reality, and any attempt to burst their bubble should be avoided, as such attempts are often met with extreme emotions and potentially rage. An inability to empathize with the emotions of those around them. As such, they have no issue with hurting people for personal gain. Frequently, they employ guilt and shame as weapons to use against you. 5 telltale signs that you are dealing with a master manipulator. Here are 5 specific behaviors to keep an eye out for. 1. Deliberate button pushing. This may be in the form of a seemingly harmless banter or negative humor, but don't be fooled. Its real purpose is to demean you, providing the manipulator with a sense of superiority over you. For example, "What a lovely jacket! My mother also has one of those." 2. Discomforting surprises. If an individual seems to take pleasure in breaking bad news, beware of him or her. 3. Sarcasm. This is another method of veiling hostility towards you. By masking their nastiness with sarcasm, many manipulators think that they cannot be called out on it. This category also includes repetitive teasing, often followed by a claim that they were just kidding or only messing with you. 4. Indirect hurting you through someone or something that you hold dear. This is another way to mask their truly manipulative identity. For example, a jealous and manipulative housemate might throw a red towel in the wash with your favorite white dress. 5. Being controlling and possessive. This applies especially to intimate and romantic relationships. Jealousy and possessive behaviors are a clear symptom of a toxic relationship. It's imperative to understand that you don't deserve to be locked away. Real-life examples. Here are a few practical examples of situations involving manipulations. Any encounter similar to these should be setting off alarm bells. There is someone close to you whose drama seems to revolve around. However, when it comes down to it, they never seem to be at fault. If someone is surrounded by, upset, but always seemingly blameless, you should be suspicious. Word gets back to you that a potential manipulator has been discussing you behind your back, but when you confront them, they brush it off and try to reassure you with a pleasant smile. Beware of the two-faced. Someone you spend time with frequently gives you a cause to doubt yourself. It may simply be that this person is a manipulator and cannot bear being wrong, therefore puts you down to compensate for their incorrectness. Takeaway points. There are many ways to spot a manipulator. The main traits to keep an eye out for are 1. Lack of empathy. 2. Vicious humor. 3. Covertly hurting you. Narcissists are typically manipulative, so be aware of those with narcissistic traits. Chapter 3. The Manipulator in Action. They know what makes us laugh, what makes us fearful, what excites us, what turns us off, and above all, what makes us vulnerable. George Simmons, Ph.D., an expert in character disorders. This chapter will explore in depth some of the techniques most commonly employed by manipulators. As mentioned above, the purpose of these is not to teach you to manipulate others, but to make you aware of the methods used by those who would. You can't win a battle if you don't know who you're fighting or what weapons they are using. Gaslighting. The term gaslighting comes from the title of the 1938 stage play Gaslight, aka Angel Street, in which a manipulative husband attempts to convince his wife that she is insane by manipulating small elements of her surroundings, insisting that she is misremembering things and maintaining that she is delusional. There are many ways that a manipulator can use gaslighting, but in short, gaslighting is a form of manipulation that involves the sowing of doubts in your mind to the extent that you may begin to question your own memory, perception, or sanity. Gaslighting is an extreme form of victimization that is most commonly seen in close couples. Whilst this technique is most often seen in intimate and romantic relationships where the two individuals have a solid understanding of one another's psychology, it can also occur in other settings such as the workplace. An example of workplace gaslighting would be if a colleague convinced you to doubt the quality of your work, potentially by diverting conversations to weaknesses within it. Gaslighting is particularly detrimental when the perpetrator is in a position of power. By constantly questioning you, a manipulator may lead you to feel that you're going crazy, that your memory is failing you, or that you are completely imagining things. Another method of gaslighting is by twisting your words and by applying a new meaning to what you said, despite knowing what you truly meant. For example, yesterday your partner promised to cook you a meal, but today they insist that you dreamed up the entire conversation. Another more extreme example is in physically abusive relationships. There have been documented cases in which the abusive spouse maintains that they have never actually been violent in any way, forcing severe doubt into the victim's mind and encouraging them to question their own mental health. Gaslighting targets the victim's self-esteem, undermining them and the validity of their beliefs to the point that the victim themselves comes to believe that they are wrong. This may even lead to a form of Stockholm syndrome in which the victim becomes more attached to the manipulator as they are so uncertain of the reality that they have nowhere else to turn. Psychological literature identifies 3 common forms of gaslighting. 1. Hiding. The manipulator hides objects from the victim in order to introduce an element of doubt in their psychological state and possibly even blame themselves. It may be that this is an entry-level gaslighting, the first step towards instilling doubt in the victim. 2. Changing. The abuser may physically change something about the victim, such as a behavior or appearance. They are attempting to mold the victim to their design, and if the victim refuses, the manipulator may convince the victim that he or she is not good enough to fulfill their fantasy and is therefore unworthy of their attention. 3. Control. This is common in jealous and overbearing partners. When the manipulator wants full control of the victim, it's likely that they will try to isolate and seclude them, limiting their interactions with family and friends, whilst the manipulator gains pleasure from the sense of power and control that they feel. In his book, State of Confusion, Political Manipulation and the Assault on the American Mind, Bryant Welsh explores the extent to which the media and especially politicians have used gaslighting to get their way. Therefore, this particular method of manipulation is not confined to intimate relationships, but is broadly applicable to many aspects of everyday life. Gaslighting is extremely prominent in American politics and journalism. Try watching a heated interview on Fox News or something similar to see how journalists employ manipulative word twisting to make for a dramatic and confrontational segment of their show. 12 ways gaslighters manipulate and control relationships. Writing on psychiatry typically conclude that severe gaslighting is highly detrimental to one's mental health and frequently results in clinical depression. Here are some of the warning signs associated with gaslighting so that you can avoid victimization. 1. The manipulator denies saying something altogether, even though you have proof or a vivid recollection of the event. They consistently deny this until you begin to doubt your own memory. 2. The manipulator uses things and people that are close to you as a weapon against you. He or she may tell you that you are not worthy of your partner repeatedly until you may just begin to believe them. 3. They highlight your negative traits. Nobody's perfect. We all have negative traits, but when someone focuses repeatedly on yours, it may be that they are trying to damage your ego, raising your self-consciousness. 4. They frequently tell blatant lies. They are bold and brash in their lying, maintaining a straight face even when you have proof against them. This is a method of keeping you unsteady, off-kilter, and questioning yourself. 5. They are persistent in their criticisms. Gaslighting often involves a gradual, longitudinal approach to emotional manipulation. It may even occur over the space of years. It may start small and build. Be aware of those who make increasingly frequent put-downs. 6. General dishonesty. They say one thing and mean another. They don't follow through on promises, and you have several examples of this occurring. 7. They deliberately confuse you. Confusion is their friend and your enemy. It allows them to maintain a social edge over you, simply by making you unsure of your own thoughts. 8. They use positive reinforcement against you. We will discuss the positive reinforcement below. 9. They turn others against you. By telling others that you are imagining things or even that you're crazy, the perpetrator strengthens their argument and weakens yours. They want you to be unsure of who you can trust, who you can turn to for clarification of what actually happened. They may even say, "Other people have noticed it too. We're just concerned about you," or "We don't think you're quite right." 10. They tell you that everyone else is a liar. This encourages you to trust the gaslighter above all else and leaves you with few other options for where to turn when you need support. 11. They encourage your paranoia. They fuel the fire of doubt in your mind until it feels as though it's taken over. 12. A common method of gaslighting is to break you down before building you back up again. This ensures that you are highly dependent on the manipulator and that you will always turn to them when your doubt hits a peak. Don't be fooled. They will tear you down again. We will discuss methods of dealing with manipulators in general later on in this book, but for now, here are a few things you might like to consider when you think you might be dealing with a gaslighter. You need to be clear of who is gaslighting you and what methods they are using. This will allow you to be certain, and such confirmation is essential to maintaining certainty in yourself. Make notes and keep a record of suspected attempts to undermine your mental health. Meditation and mindfulness allow for a certain clarity of mind that is difficult to maintain in the busy 21st century lives that we lead. Even 10 minutes per day could be beneficial, and it will help you to keep hold of the reality of your situation. Discuss the gaslighter's accusations with your most trusted friends and family. You can expect the truth from them. If you are being manipulated, they may be able to shed some light on the specifics and bring you some relief. If you feel that significant damage has been done to your mental health and your perspective of reality, then you should consider seeking professional treatment from a qualified therapist. Once you have overcome the manipulation and regained trust in yourself, it's time to consider yourself a survivor, no longer a victim. To further prepare you, here are a few common gaslighting phrases, each of which serves the manipulator's needs in different ways. Keep your ears pricked for these. You're crazy. You need help or have issues. You're insecure or jealous. You're too sensitive or overreacting. I was only joking. You have no sense of humor. It's your problem, not mine. You're imagining things. I never said that. You're lying to me. Don't you remember? Stop taking everything so seriously. What does that say about you? Although much of this information refers to preventative measures such as identifying the gaslighter before they have had the opportunity to manipulate you, it's important to remember that even if the damage has already been done, you can regain the self-confidence that the manipulator has stripped you of. The guilt trip. Guilt tripping is a covert intimidation tactic, a way for the manipulator to exploit your conscientiousness. It typically involves persuading you to feel guilty, usually by claiming that you are ungrateful, that you have it easy, or are to blame for a particular circumstance. The intention of this is generally to put you in a state of moral self-doubt. A guilt tripper may try to make you feel responsible for something that is not necessarily your fault in order to put you in a vulnerable or a submissive position. It is generally considered to be a common form of passive aggression and may occur whether the victim is genuinely guilty or not, and it may even be nonverbal. By reminding you of something painful, something that you did wrong or could have done better, the perpetrator gains the apparent moral high ground over you. The guilt tripper may then offer you an option to escape your guilt, proposing a way for you to right your wrongs, characteristically in a way that serves their needs. The intention is that you feel obliged to comply with their suggestion, so that you may free yourself of the guilt that they have imposed upon you. When you refuse to comply with the guilt tripper's request and desires, you may be met with antagonism, the silent treatment, discussed in more detail later, or generally, animosity. By doing this, they reinforce the seed of guilt that they have planted in your mind, forcing you to reconsider their request again and again. Guilt tripping has been observed in a variety of situations and relationships. The manipulator may be a complete stranger, a close partner, a dear friend, a boss or colleague, or even a parent or child. Guilt trips are extremely dangerous to children who are tragically one of the most common victims. As with other techniques, guilt trippers have giveaways and telltale signs. The more aware you are, the better your psychological self-defense. Guilt trips are not the easiest psychological manipulation technique to spot, but here are some examples of warning signs to keep an eye out for. Passing responsibility. As their target, the buck will be passed to you. Beware of anyone trying to make you feel bad, even if it's for something you are actually responsible for. The potential guilt tripper may have an agenda of their own beyond making you feel bad. The guilt tripper will likely nag you. They are repetitive in their accusations of responsibility. This is an attempt to grind you down. They may complicate matters. A guilt tripper's agenda may be forwarded by blowing your faults out of proportion, making mountains of molehills and forcing you to consider your mistakes with greater weight than they in fact deserve. They drag up old instances where you were at fault. This is to provide them with more ammunition, making you feel guiltier still, whilst helping them to make their malicious and self-serving point. They may reference the occasions where they have helped you. This is a common trick that encourages you to consider yourself in debt. They may begin sentences with phrases like, "Remember when I did that thing for you? Don't you remember when I..." or "if it weren't for me." As far as manipulation techniques go, guilt tripping is particularly hard to resist. This is because, at surface value, it seems as though the manipulator is being perfectly reasonable and that you may indeed be at fault, although methods for dealing with manipulators will be discussed in detail later on. Here are some ways that might help you to deal specifically with a guilt tripper. Explain that Even if you go along with what they want, you are aware of their coercion and resent the fact that they would guilt trip you. Tell them you understand how important it is to them that you do the thing they want you to, but that you don't appreciate the way that they are approaching the situation. Maintain a high level of self-esteem. This will make you a much harder target for the guilt tripper. The lower your self-esteem, the more likely you are to doubt yourself, and the easier it is for the perpetrator to convince you that you are in the wrong. Absolutely never admit guilt when you are confident in your innocence. You need to be very honest with yourself about this, but never allow yourself to be persuaded of false guilt. Ask the guilt tripper to be more direct in their request. Explain that there is no need for coercion and that an upfront approach to problem solving is far more likely to be successful. Try not to get caught up in a war of guilt. Maintaining the non-manipulative moral high ground is your very best option. It pays to be patient. The chances are that, at one time or another in life, you have also tried to guilt trip someone, whether you meant to or not. Some social coercion stems from the subconscious, and it's worth remembering that we all have desires and that nobody is entirely innocent. Passive aggression. Whilst overtly aggressive behaviors are easier to spot, passive-aggressive behavior, often described as acting catty, may be used by a manipulator who is trying to avoid direct confrontation. It is one of the sneakier methods they might use to get what they want. A passive-aggressive person may act consciously or subconsciously in their attempts to passively, that's indirectly, use subtle forms of aggression against you. Whilst it's a term that we have all heard used before, many of us are unclear on exactly what it means. Simply, passive aggression is an attempt to be indirectly hostile towards you. There are no guidelines as to what sort of person employs passive aggression. It may be a family member, partner, colleague, or a complete stranger. In fact, the chances are that you have used it yourself at some point. It has also been suggested that certain medications can cause people to act with subtle aggression, so consider this when assessing a potential manipulator. For the above reasons, it can be tricky to spot passive aggression, largely because it's such a significant part of everyday social interactions. So that you know what you're dealing with, here are a few instances of common passive-aggressive behaviors. Any of these should set off your now finely tuned mental manipulator alarm. Claiming that they don't understand, when in fact they do. Plain dumb allows the manipulator to avoid any responsibilities. This is a common passive-aggressive strategy. It may be something as simple as a friend of a co-worker who has failed to greet you when you know that normally they would. This gives you the impression that something is amiss and may be an attempt to bend you to their will. The silent treatment, whilst also mentioned elsewhere in this book, is another example of passive aggression. Being ignored in this way can be overt and obvious, such as your partner ignoring you because you said something to offend them, or it may be that the perpetrator claims their ignorance to be accidental. Subtle insults, often in the form of a backhanded compliment. It may be that you don't realize that the compliment was in fact an insult until the other person has already gone, but something about what they said wasn't as friendly as it seemed on the surface. For example, rather than saying your work is great, they may say that it's almost as good as your coworkers. Simple moodiness can be a method of disguising passive aggression. They may claim that they are just having a bad day, but you heard them talking with someone else and sounding perfectly chirpy. Again, you sense that something is amiss. Stubbornness. Some people are naturally stubborn. We've all met them, but others use artificial stubbornness as something to hide behind, a way to punish you. This is usually little sense arguing with a person whose stubborn defenses are up. Passive-aggressive behavior can be as covert as simply underperforming. They won't fail to complete their task, but they will do it with minimum effort. For example, to spite the boss who set them their assignment. They may hide behind a mask of ambiguity, but they and you know exactly what they're doing. Evidently, there are many forms of passive aggression. You should try to consider other behaviors that have more unpleasant underlying meanings than they seem at face value. Now that you know what to keep a lookout for, here are a few methods that you can use when dealing with a passive aggressor. Ignore them. Let the problem be theirs. This is also beneficial because they are often, on some level, aware of their manipulative behavior, and to call them on it may only serve to worsen their animosities. If you don't react, they may simply stop their behaviors. Sometimes behavior cannot be ignored. They may have significantly offended you, and you feel that to remain silent would be failing to correct a genuinely nasty behavior. Try not to confront them. The best thing to do here would be to put some distance between you and them. You could subtly try to make them aware of their behaviors if you think that they are not already consciously aware that they are using passive aggression. Don't try to make them admit anything. Just share your thoughts about the possibility of their being indirect. Do this with tact and gentleness and try to avoid confrontation. Perhaps ask them if there's something else that could be bothering them and causing them to act in this way. Intermittent reinforcement. The more infrequently the crumbs of love are offered, the more hooked you are. You become conditioned, like a rat in a cage. Unknown. Intermittent reinforcement, like positive reinforcement, discussed in greater depth below, is another manipulative method that uses conditioning to achieve the desired response. Conditioning is, basically, the use of a reward system to reinforce desirable behaviors. Psychologists discovered that rewarding a rat regularly for behavior has diminishing returns, whereas rewarding the rat intermittently kept the subjects working harder for longer. Intermittent reinforcement is the provision of rewards at irregular intervals. This method has been found in studies of rats, primates, and humans to yield the greatest results from the subject. In this case, the result is the victim's attempt to comply with the manipulator's desire. Instead of, for example, a dog receiving a biscuit every time it executes a trick, it receives a biscuit intermittently, that is, irregularly. This encourages the dog to repeat the trick over and over, satisfying the manipulator until the reward is given seemingly at random. Alarmingly, the same behavioral psychology theories apply to humans. In the case of humans, the victim might be a lazy boyfriend who leaves his clothes strewn across the bedroom floor every day. The manipulator, his girlfriend, rewards him intermittently with a kiss when he picks them up. Not every time, though. This encourages him to keep picking up his clothes until the next kiss, that's the reward, is delivered. Intermittent reinforcement is also employed by the tech giants that pull our strings as frequently as any other malicious entity. For example, your social media service determines that you are likely to log off soon, but it wants you to stay. It needs you to stay. So shortly before it expects you to log off, having determined your usage patterns already, it delivers the likes that you have been waiting for regarding your holiday photographs. By feeding you these little bites of reinforcement at times that seem random, but are in fact determined by algorithms, they encourage you to stay. Creepy, aren't they? So that's one example of how intermittent reinforcement can be used for monetary gain by vast corporations. Can you avoid it? Obviously, you could quit social media, but this writer doesn't expect you to do that. It's all simply too ingrained into real life. However, simply being aware of such an invasive manipulative practice gives you the edge on those who are not. When those endorphin-laced likes show up in your inbox, you can proceed to log off and come back to them at a time that suits you. Yet another example is in gambling. The gambler is drip-fed just enough rewards to keep them playing, to keep them spending and hoping for that one get-rich quick cash injection jackpot. In relationships, intermittent reinforcement often comes in the form of attention and affection. When the manipulator treats their spouse coldly, they create fear in the victim, a fear of losing the relationship. When they intermittently reinforce by offering affection in some way, the victim's hope is restored for a while before being dashed once again. This serves as an extremely effective motivator for the victim to do everything they can to keep the relationship alive. It's like the manipulator has control of the victim's dopamine supply, randomly throwing a reward whenever it suits them, whilst the victim kneels, eagerly awaiting their next dose of pleasure. Over time, intermittent reinforcement can be gradually and carefully elevated and ramped up to quite extreme levels. Some have even argued that, when considered over time, intermittent reinforcement is one of the most powerful dark psychological manipulation techniques known to man. It can potentially lead to obsessive and self-destructive behavioral patterns. Manipulators, especially in the case of close interpersonal relationships, may incorporate such social isolation techniques. The silent treatment. A proven method dreaded by all, the manipulator withdraws communications as a punishment to the victim. The victim attempts to reform the communication pathway, but is met by yet more silence. The invisible treatment. A stronger but less common version of the silent treatment is when the manipulator withdraws even more of their attention, refusing even to acknowledge the victim. After being given one of the above treatments, the victim is flooded with pleasure and relief when the next dose of attention is delivered. This is the breaking down of hope, then sporadically reinforcing it. The effects of intermittent reinforcement on the victim are quite varied, but generally symptoms include feeling needy, crazy, or insecure. Never knowing where you stand in the relationship may cause you to act or feel in these ways. In intermittent reinforcement, the instability and uncertainty are the real tormentors. Dealing with intermittent reinforcement is not the hardest thing to do. You need to break the cycle of dependence because intermittent reinforcements work just like an addiction. Identifying when someone is using it against you, however, is extremely difficult. You could consider this relatively high-level manipulator spotting. Here are a few hints that you should find helpful. Someone close to you has suddenly become withholding of the things that make you happy. It may be affection, or it could come in just any form. They drip feed you the positive reinforcement, whereas they used to be generous with it. The unpredictability of someone's behavior is driving you crazy. Some days they seem like their friendly selves, whilst other days they seem withdrawn and unfriendly. Look out for general inconsistencies in the perpetrator's mood and manner. Bear in mind that the most common users of intermittent reinforcement are those closest to you with the ability to grant and withhold pleasure. A short message from the author. Hey, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to check in and ask if you're enjoying the Dark Psychology Secrets audiobook. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Many readers and listeners don't know how hard reviews actually are to come by and how much they help an author. So I would be incredibly thankful if you could take just 60 seconds to leave a quick review on Audible, even if it's just a sentence or two. And don't worry, it won't interrupt this audiobook. To do so, just click the 3 dots in the top right corner of your screen inside of your Audible app and hit the Rate and Review button. This will take you to the Rate and Review page where you can enter your star rating and then write a sentence or two about the audiobook. It's that simple. I look forward to reading your review. Leave a little message as I personally read every review. Now I'll walk you through the process as you do it. Just unlock your phone, click the 3 dots in the top right corner of your screen and hit the Rate and Review button. Enter your star rating, and that's it. That's all you need to do. I'll give you another 10 seconds just to finish sharing your thoughts. Thank you so much for taking the time to leave a short review on Audible. I'm very appreciative, as your review truly makes a difference for me. Positive reinforcement. Reinforcement is a long-standing behavioral psychology theory. It is a form of conditioning, like reinforcing a particular desired behavior through a system of punishment and rewards. It is a way of forcing another to learn a particular behavior and to repeat it. Positive reinforcement specifically refers to experimenter or the potential manipulator providing the subject or victim with a desired reward each time they carry out the behavior that should be repeated. For example, when the dog does a trick, you give it a biscuit. It comes to associate the action with the reward and is therefore more inclined to repeat the behavior or the trick. This is known as operant conditioning. Reinforcement of any type, including those discussed in previous sections of this book, can be applied to humans in both obvious and covert ways. One example would be a gold star sticker reward system in a classroom. The children come to associate the behavior that the teacher desires with a form of reward, even when the reward has no actual value. As mentioned, reinforcement can come in all shapes and sizes. For this reason, you may find a manipulator using reinforcement against you quite difficult to identify. In order to help you understand the variety of reinforcement methods that may be used, consider these examples of possible rewards. Praise. Simply congratulating you, giving you a little warm feeling of satisfaction can be enough to keep you repeating the desired behavior. Money. A financial reward is universally understood, though more common in certain cultures than in others. For example, giving a tip to a worker who did a good job or pocket money to a child who has behaved well. Charm. Especially superficial charm. The manipulative charmer enjoys wrapping their victims around their fingers for full control. Attention. In the case of a close personal or romantic relationship, attention may serve as a reward that is either awarded for good behavior or withheld following undesirable behaviors. This is not the basis of a healthy relationship, and if you spot this dynamic within yours, you should probably consider speaking to your partner about it. Gifts of any sort. They could be physical gifts, or they could come in a less direct form, but a gift following the desired behavior may be a conscious attempt to reinforce that particular behavior. Keep this in mind, but don't become immediately suspicious of anyone who buys you flowers. A smile. Even a smile could be enough to manipulate your behavioral patterns, assuming you want the smiler to be happy. If you're suspicious of this practice, try looking at their eyes. We can often distinguish a false smile from a genuine one considering the smiler's eyes. It should be noted that positive reinforcement may occur naturally in a relationship, and that is not necessarily malicious. It can even be part of a perfectly healthy relationship, providing that things don't go too far. If you find yourself craving for your next hit of reinforcement, maybe it's time to ask whether your actions make you happy or if you're just chasing an endless breadcrumb trail of gifts and smiles for no real reason. Using your own judgment is the best thing you can do here. Consider things on a case-by-case basis, and know that some relationship counselors even recommend an amount of positive reinforcement to encourage a cooperative relationship. A word about negative reinforcement. You, as someone who is beginning to understand how psychological manipulation can work, should also consider negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is the opposite of positive reinforcement, but is still another way to influence behaviors. In this case, it involves removing a punishment rather than giving a reward to reinforce a behavior. An example of negative reinforcement is a husband willingly doing the dishes. That's the desired behavior because he knows that his wife will nag him, which is a form of punishment, if he leaves them in the kitchen sink. In summary, reinforcement can occur naturally or maliciously in obvious or covert styles. You should be aware of the possibilities, but careful not to jump to any conclusions regarding people's motives. Invalidation. Invalidation is a method of demeaning a person by ignoring or rejecting their thoughts and feelings. Such a technique may be used by manipulators who seek to wear down or instill self-doubt in an attempt to make the victim feel worthless. Invalidation keeps the victim at a distance by reducing the value of their thoughts and feelings, and may be just one part of an ongoing psychological war between manipulator and victim. Like gaslighting, invalidation is another method that can be used to make the victim feel as though they're losing their faculties when they are in fact perfectly sane. Invalidation is a particularly dirty manipulation technique and is directly harmful to the victim. Being invalidated can worsen self-esteem issues and make a recovery from depression or anxiety much more difficult. It can occur in various forms. It may be rejecting the value of someone's perceptions, mocking their feelings, or outright ignoring someone's contributions to a conversation. This leads the victim to feel undervalued and in turn diminishes their confidence. Whilst invalidation is extremely commonplace in all social situations, like the workplace, family, romantic, partner, etc., it is extremely unhealthy. It may be that the manipulator is completely unaware that they are doing it. It may be that they simply lack empathy. It may be even that you are the manipulator and hadn't realized that by ignoring or consistently rejecting a friend or a colleague, you are causing them significant mental anguish. The terrible truth is that invalidation has become commonplace, acceptable behavior in modern society. As mentioned, some may use invalidation without knowing, but others would deliberately weaponize it for any number of reasons. They may envy you and so seek to reduce you to the level that they perceive themselves to be on. They may feel that by invalidating others, they gain a competitive edge in terms of social interaction. Invalidation may be perceived as a lack of empathy in the abuser. Once again, this raises the issue of narcissism, which is often characterized by a lack of empathy. We all have emotional needs, and we all seek to satisfy them. When a manipulator invalidates our needs, he or she undermines them. We feel that our needs are unimportant, that we perhaps complain too much, or even that we are unloved. Research has even found that prolonged emotional invalidation can lead a victim to emotional suppression, repressing feelings and inhibiting emotional thoughts. Furthermore, emotional suppression is strongly associated with high levels of psychological distress and dissatisfaction. Invalidation does not have to be vocal, but more often than not, it is. So here are a few examples of statements that may be intended to invalidate you. Must we talk about this again? You're taking it too seriously. We already spoke about this. You don't even know how lucky you are. Get over it, or cheer up, or stop whining. You take everything so personally. Don't act so seriously. Don't be ridiculous. Don't be so judgmental. Are you joking? You're just tired, or you're just hungry. It's not a big deal. You ought to be thankful. Just forget about it all. Stop imagining things. You're sounding crazy. As mentioned, invalidation isn't necessarily always verbal. For example, the silent treatment can be employed to make you feel that your previous comment wasn't worthy of a response, or by an abuser simply rolling their eyes. You might feel that you are undervalued, or that your contribution was stupid. By showing impatience or boredom in their body language, the invalidator makes you feel undervalued. There are many ways invalidation could occur, and you should use your imagination to ensure that you are aware of all possibilities. In the case that you feel invalidated by your partner in a close relationship, you should raise the point with them gently. Explain that you don't feel that your emotions are valued by them, and help them identify their problematic behaviors by highlighting a few of the undermining phrases that they use. Keep in mind that their behavior may be accidental. The best solution is to replace the invalidation with genuine validation. Pay attention to one another's feelings and try reversing some of the above statements to help you or the perpetrator to be more positive in the way that they receive your feelings. Triangulation. Never let the other person use absence or create pain and conflict to keep you, the seduced, on tenterhooks. Robert Greene, The Art of Seduction. Triangulation is another manipulation method that is designed to make the victim seem insecure and is especially applicable to close personal relationships. It involves the manipulator bringing a third person into the relationship equation, causing the victim to feel doubtful about the solidity and future of the relationship. By doing this, the manipulator has not only put you on the back foot and forced you to consider a future in which the relationship fails, but they also have made you considerably more eager to please them. A clear example would be if your partner is flirting with someone else. This action may be to deliberately cast doubt upon their feelings for you and encourage you to try to please them to regain your status in the relationship. What's more, if you confront a manipulator who is using triangulation, you may even find yourself being blamed for the issue. They may openly claim that the problem is not with their behavior, but a symptom of your insecurity. You should seek to bring your relationship out into the open. You both need to be on the same page, where you both feel a sense of security and stability. Also, consider how much you would actually want to be with a person who might use a manipulation tactic as vicious as this one. Trust is essential. Lying. Lying, by its definition, is deliberately presenting a falsehood as the truth. But of course, you already knew that. It is still, however, important to consider why the manipulator lies. There are many approaches to lying, some of which tie into the manipulation methods that we have already discussed. The manipulator's motive to lie is something that you should always consider when you become suspicious or when you catch someone in a lie. Ask yourself, what are they trying to get out of this lie? Some are better at lying than others, and the best liars are extremely good at it. They can look us in the eye with a reassuring smile and tell us something that is entirely untrue, yet we believe it all the same. There are many approaches to lying, and a lie does not always come in the simple form of an untrue statement. It may be that the lie is actually a half-truth, making it even easier to believe. Also consider how a manipulator may deliberately withhold information. The absence of truth is a lot easier to justify than an outright lie, yet it has a similar effect. It's important that we are aware of liars and that we are skeptical when presented with information that we just don't know to be true. When this happens, consider the following questions. What might be their motive for lying about this? Is there anything in it for them? Has this person ever lied to me before? Do I generally consider them trustworthy? Do I have any evidence to the contrary of what they're saying? Don't get too caught up in doubting everything you hear. People are not all innately cruel. Sometimes we have to take things at face value, and to become too wrapped up in a skepticism can lead to an unhealthy, paranoid state of mental being. Love bombing. Any halfway clever devil would decorate the highway to hell as beautifully as possible. Chris Jammy. Whilst generally flattery has its place in many methods of psychological manipulation, love bombing is an attempt to specifically influence an individual by bombarding them with positivity. It has various uses, of which psychological manipulation is just one. It has been used by cults and lovers alike and identified by psychologists as a potentially potent method of manipulation. By overwhelming someone with love, attention, and affection, a feeling of unity and a codependence, whether healthy or not, can be established. Love bombing is employed by narcissists often to win your confidence. How could such an overly positive and endearing person mean you any harm? Beware of those who are overly flattering, as they may be pulling your strings. Love bombing is a bit of a Trojan horse. At first, it feels good, and that is very much the purpose. To put you at ease, to make you more open, or to win your affection. But be assured that soon enough, you'll stop feeling so good, and the narcissist will get their way. It has also been suggested that social media worsens love bombing and similar methods of abuse because the perpetrator has almost constant communication with the victim. Examples of behavior that may indicate love bombing or over-flattering behaviors include the following. The potential narcissist showers you with gifts. They must be after something, and they think they can win you over with things. The romantic partner who texts you relentlessly, their attention seemingly always on you, but you suspect that their mind is elsewhere. Your relationship is moving uncomfortably fast. They tell you that they have loved no one like you. You are meant to be together, and they have never been more certain of anything. It may be that a colleague constantly compliments your work above anyone else's, and they do this far too frequently. There are various reasons for why a manipulator may love bomb you. Their personality is lacking, so they compensate with material objects. They feel guilty and are flattering for forgiveness. As a method of baiting and switching, they're getting you to lower your defenses. They want to build up your image of them. They want to be seen as eternally loving and probably quite wealthy. Be warned that there is a fine line between love bombing and normal healthy affection, so be careful not to misinterpret someone's love for manipulation. That said, if it begins to feel more like stalking than affections, you might just have a narcissist on your hands. Recap. We have now explored some of the logistics of psychological manipulation, the practical techniques. Here are the main takeaway points from this chapter. There are many forms of manipulation. The most common include: 1. Gaslighting is leading people to doubt themselves. 2. Guilt tripping is exploiting someone's conscientiousness. 3. Positive or negative reinforcement is a form of conditioning. 4. Intermittent reinforcement is a powerful but unpredictable motivator. 5. Invalidation is the dismissal of someone else's thoughts or feelings. 6. Lying comes in all shapes and sizes. There are other subcategories within these that encompass common techniques, such as the silent treatment, love bombing, and triangulation. Dealing with manipulators. Love comes when manipulation stops, when you think more about the other person than about his or her reactions to you, when you dare to reveal yourself fully, when you dare to be vulnerable. Joyce Brothers. Whilst there are as many approaches to dealing with manipulation as there are approaches to manipulating another, this chapter will highlight some methods and tactics that you may use in the case that you find yourself being exploited through one of the methods discussed in the previous chapter. The good news is that the root of the problem is often within the manipulator themselves, though they would have you believe otherwise. It frequently stems from a feeling of inadequacy or a lack of emotional intelligence and empathy. It may be that the manipulator is afraid of failure or in need of constant validation, and that the only way they can achieve this is by stepping on others. This means that the manipulator has vulnerabilities and that their nastiness may simply be part of a cold exterior that is designed to propel them towards their self-serving goals. It would be helpful to remember this when dealing with a confrontational manipulator, but not to exploit these weaknesses. To do so would be to lose the moral high ground of the situation. Some methods mentioned here will be relevant to specific forms of manipulation, whilst others are more of a broad approach to how to manage people around you with toxic and narcissistic personalities. Remember, a confrontation with a manipulator is a delicate matter and must be handled as such. How to disarm a manipulator. Whilst, as previously mentioned, many manipulators will go to great lengths to avoid confrontation, it is likely that their actions will culminate in, at the very least, a heated discussion. Here are a few ideas to help you deal with this encounter. Remain calm and controlled. Don't lose your temper. This is absolutely essential when it comes to maintaining your moral high ground. If you start raving at someone about how manipulative they are, you will soon find yourself being taken less seriously. A calm and calculated but emotionally present approach is advisable. Avoid personal blame. You're not the problem, and you should not allow the manipulator to turn the tables on you. As mentioned earlier, manipulators are often keen to pass the blame onto their victims. This serves two needs. Firstly, it puts the victim in a difficult, uncertain position of doubt. Secondly, it frees them of any blame, allowing them to proceed in their wily, manipulative ways. Keep control of the conversation. Try to take the conversational lead by asking them questions rather than allowing them to probe you. This also serves two needs. It shows them that you're not to be trifled with, that you are willing to stand up for yourself and are in control. And secondly, by probing them, you can get closer to the root of the problem, digging out the facts and discarding their lies. Call them out on their behavior. There are some above examples of situations when this is specifically not advised, but sometimes a bold and simple approach is favorable. Don't do this with any aggression. Try to phrase the inquisition not as an accusation of them, but as a suggestion as to the cause of their behaviors. Walk away. By perpetuating your relationship with the manipulator, you just add fuel to their fire. If you're not interacting with them and you have no need to interact with them in the future, then simply leave. Obviously, this is not advisable in the case of a partner, friend, or family member. But if the manipulator is a relative stranger, what's to lose? Deal with the questionable behavior as soon as possible. Don't allow yourself to get used to it. If you let them get away with whatever it is that they shouldn't be doing, they will almost certainly try it again and again. This is especially true in the case of those with narcissistic personality disorders. Call a spade, but don't call a narcissist. Be upfront and truthful and honest in your conversation with the manipulator. Let them know how their actions affect you and how that makes you feel. But be careful to avoid angering them or directly accusing them. Although they seem cold and cruel in their actions, they may just be behaving manipulatively because they feel insecure in themselves. Remember this, but don't weaponize it. How to break free and keep the manipulator at distance. Here are a few key tips to help you avoid this happening. Don't consider revenge. Nothing good will come of it. The narcissist enjoys drama and manipulative warfare, so it's advisable to not give them the satisfaction. Just take comfort in the knowledge that you blew their disguise, identified them as a manipulator, and walk away from them. Cut all communications. If a narcissist has been particularly damaging to your psyche, you may consider cutting all contact absolutely. Block their number, avoid the places that you know they frequent, and try to keep distinctly separate social circles. Trust your own judgment and do what you know is best for you. This may mean ending a particularly toxic relationship, but deep down you know that's the only way to get out from underneath your oppressive partner. Of course, you shouldn't make any rash decisions, especially when in a state of frustration. Weigh up the pros and cons of your relationship and objectively assess any issues before confronting your partner about them. Seek professional help. Psychiatry has numerous methods of rebuilding your self-confidence and helping you to heal the wounds. If you feel that any damage that may have been done is significant, or if you're struggling to deal with things on your own and your loved ones haven't been much help, you should consider this. Come to terms with what has happened. Maybe the manipulator fooled you. Maybe they got the better of you. Maybe they hurt you in some way or did some psychological damage whilst they took you for a ride. But you have come through the other side. Now's the time to stop considering yourself a victim and to consider yourself a survivor. Congratulations. Some narcissist-specific advice. As mentioned, many manipulators are narcissists and vice versa. Here are a few practical pointers for when it comes to dealing with your narcissistic manipulator. Understand exactly who they are. Remember that narcissism, it's not impossible that they may manage, but it could take a great deal of your energy to make them do so. If you find yourself being drawn into the web of neediness, take some time to yourself and remember that it's not your job to fix this person. Set boundaries that maintain your privacy and personal space. Narcissists often have a sense of entitlement to you and to your things. As soon as they overstep, be sure to put them in their place, as an invasive behavior allowed to go unpunished will almost always result in a repeat offense. Expect resistance. They will push back against your boundaries. This is the real test because it's time for you to stand your ground and stick to your metaphorical guns. Understand that the narcissists themselves may need professional help. People with narcissistic personality disorder often have overlapping disorders such as substance abuse. These people don't need beating into submission. They need coaxing into getting treatment. Try gently questioning their well-being and checking that they are feeling okay, or explaining that you are concerned about them. Above all of the advice in this section, remember that narcissists are still people. They are individuals and each one is different. Therefore, you cannot simply approach any manipulator or narcissist in a generic manner. Your confrontation must be tailor-made to suit them. Recap. Here are a few concise points for you to take away from this chapter. Try to keep them in mind whilst deciding how to address the problem of your manipulator. 1. Keep hold of your high moral ground. 2. A short temper is your enemy. 3. Be honest, but not confrontational. 4. Once you have made your decision, stick with it. 5. Overcome the damage done and accept that it was a learning experience. Conclusion. The purpose of this book is to provide you with some insight into how a manipulator may exploit you in the hope that you may avoid some psychological trauma in the future. Now that we have covered a range of psychological manipulation techniques, look at who the manipulators are and why they do it, and learning that the root of the problem most often lies within the liars themselves, you should feel better equipped to face those people who might seek to do you harm. You now have the tools at your disposal that allows you to identify a manipulator, regardless of their methods, and to deal with the issue appropriately. Keeping the main points of this book fresh in your mind will help you to identify and deal with manipulators. To help you do this, here's a list of the 12 key takeaway points that you can use to refresh your memory at any time. It's advisable that you refer back to the relevant section when you are suspicious of a potential manipulator. 1. Firstly, we learned that manipulators do indeed exist and that there are plenty of them. They come in many forms, and because of this, it's important that we educate ourselves on how they operate. 2. We then explored exactly the sort of people that are prone to using social manipulation. We discussed the dark triad and narcissism, learning that the manipulator is often an unwell individual with deeply seated issues of their own. 3. A manipulator's motivation can be anything, but they are often control freaks with little empathy and are likely to target those they perceive as vulnerable. 4. We then looked at the common traits of a manipulator and narcissists. You may find it helpful to refresh your memory of these before applying your new skills to real-life situations. That's in Chapter 2. 5. The first of the main manipulation techniques that we looked at was gaslighting. This involves the manipulator sowing seeds of doubt in the mind of the victim to the extent that they question their own mental health. 6. Guilt tripping is when the manipulator attempts to exploit your conscientiousness. 7. Passive aggression is a discreet but damaging way of oppressing you and your ideals. It comes in all shapes like manipulators themselves. 8. Intermittent reinforcement is the random presentation of rewards. It keeps you working hard and long at trying to please the manipulator. 9. Positive reinforcement is less malicious. It involves rewarding the desired behavior in the hope that this will lead to it being repeated. 10. We also briefly touched upon triangulation in intimate relationships and, more generally, lying. 11. In the third chapter, we explored the best ways to deal with a manipulator, learning that confrontation is best avoided but may occasionally be unavoidable. 12. It's best to keep a distance and assess the damages before moving on with your life. All of the above is important information, but most significantly, you must remember to be your own person and to act for your own reasons. To be a puppet, dancing at the end of someone else's strings, whether they are held by your partner or your government, is quite simply no life at all. Thank you for listening. Now, remember to use your powers wisely. The end.